In this video, we are breaking down a shot from Interstellar so that we can then recreate the look. Over the course of this video, you will learn all about the analog film process, the tools in Dehancer Pro, and have the knowledge to recreate and make the Interstellar look for yourself. Be sure to use my promo code AustinSmith at checkout for 10% off if you'd like to try Dehancer Pro. Before we actually dive into the color grade, we need to understand why Nolan's films look the way they do and ask ourselves a few key questions. Why use Dehancer Pro for color grading? Why not just use a LUT or just start from scratch? A LUT is merely a table of color changing values. It cannot contain all the characteristics of the film that determine the feel of the film image. Dehancer is a complete and comprehensive tool for film emulation, which recreates all the main characteristics of the film. At the same time, the tools in Dehancer work according to the analog's principles and do not destroy the original color ratios of the film during its interpretation. This is important to us because rather than use a digital intermediate, Nolan uses photochemical color timing to color grade his films, which results in less manipulation of the filmed image and a higher film resolution. So it makes perfect sense for us to start a color grading process with Dehancer Pro. Next, we want to establish some goals so that we can successfully recreate the Interstellar look the best we can. Our first goal will be to match the white and black point of this image to our image. Notice how the image doesn't get much brighter than 896. Notice how we don't quite reach 0 here at the bottom end, but we are crushing blue. We also need to take note of what color the highlights are leaning towards. Notice how there's more red in the highlights, followed by green and then blue. And in the shadows, we have a red and green matched, but we're crushing blue. We can use visual cues as well. Notice how the shadows of our image are pretty neutral with a hint of warmth. We also want to keep in mind saturation levels as well as an overall contrast. We do need to pump our image full of contrast, but not so much so that we're creating over sharpening. There's an overall softness to this image, even though it does have a lot of contrast. The things that we can look for is just observing how dense the colors are. Notice how rich this dark brown is. Notice how rich, dense, and slightly teal the water is. We're going to be looking at these things to match our image to the reference image along with the calculations from the waveforms and the vector scopes. There are going to be a couple differences though between our images. Number one being our image has a lot more orange information because of the orange puffy coat. And number two, our overall composition isn't the same as the subject in our reference image. So we're not trying to stress to get an exact one-to-one match on this color grade. Let's take our changes and make the appropriate adjustments with our goals set. We need to select the appropriate film stock and print, match white and black points, bias our highlight areas ever so slightly towards yellow, bias our shadows ever so slightly towards red, match the skin tone of the girl on the reference image to our subject, add in a good amount of contrast without losing the smooth look, and lastly, really fine-tune our saturation levels. Let's look at our project settings to make for sure that we have DaVinci YRGB selected, Rec 709 Scene, and Rec 709A as our output setting. Next, let's add the Dehancer Pro plugin into a node and choose the appropriate setting for our camera. This was shot on Blackmagic Pocket 6K G2, so we will select Blackmagic Design, Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, and then Film Gen 5 ISO 400. While we're in the input settings, let's also adjust the temperature and tint of our image before we do any further post-processing using Dehancer Pro. To get a jump start to the look, we need to choose our film profile and print medium. Dehancer film profiles are created using unique technology of accurate sampling of color contrast characteristics of the film. We will choose our film profile based on the lighting conditions of our scene. Since our shot is outside during the day, we will choose Kodak 50D. Then we will select Kodak 2383 print film. Optical printing is the last stage of the analog production. As a result, we get a paper print for direct viewing or a positive film for screen projection. Both can be scanned for digital delivery. Optical printing is the only analog solution that can be used for proper interpretation of the negative films. One of our goals is to add density to our colors, so let's move the color density slider. Notice how we're now getting rich brown and blue colors. Let's also add a bit of tonal contrast and adjust our saturation levels. Our next goal is getting the contrast to match our reference image. For that, we will use the Film Developer tool. The Film Developer tool allows you to make conditions and creative tasks. The main purpose of the Film Developer tool is to simplify the interpretation of a variety of sources within a single node. We will adjust the contrast boost first. In analog processes, development contrast is determined by developer temperature and concentration. In Dehancer, this parameter can take both positive values and negative values. We will then adjust the gamma correction. In film processing, gamma correction controls the contrast ratio of the negative in relation to the exposure time. This parameter determines how much the midtones are shifted towards shadows or highlights. Gamma correction is possible with any contrast boost value other than 0. The Film Developer tool will allow us to really fine-tune the creative interpretation of our image before any further processing. Think of it like Dehancer's version on RAW settings. This will be useful since our image differs so greatly from our reference image in terms of focal length, composition, and lens unique qualities. The next tool we will adjust is the Film Compression tool, the electronic sensor that our camera has in the film emulsion capture light using different methods. The sensor measures light in the same way that a measuring glass meters the volume of water. After capturing a threshold amount of light, the sensor overflows like a measuring cup and cannot perceive any more information with further exposure. The photographic emulsion works differently. The sensitive layer has a considerable thickness and volume, which allows the silver halides to absorb light like a sponge and not overflow in an instant. The next tool we will use is the Expand tool. The Expand tool provides a separate manual control for black and white points in relation to the output color space. All films naturally have different contrast, different black and white points. At the sampling stage, we avoid digital correction to preserve the individual features of the films, which ensures a fair and convincing simulation. Film profiles in Dehancer without additional adjustment usually lack contrast, but at the same time they have a lot of headroom for creative adjustments. This adjustment will help us meet our white point and black point to match our reference image. Our last goal to meet is biasing our highlights toward yellow and biasing our shadows toward a greenish blue color. For that, we will use the CMY color head and print toning tool. Subtractive CMY color head is based upon the analog color correction tool integrated in photo enlargers. A similar method is used in printer lights, a special device for optical movie printing to a positive film. Both have the same principle, changing the color of light used for print exposure. Now that we have that done, we need to add a few more things to complete our image: grain, halation, and bloom. Real grain on film isn't just overlaid on top of the image, but in fact the image itself entirely consists of grain. Dehancer literally reconstructs the shot using a local color and brightness characteristics along with a complex physical modeling of a film emulsion. Halation is the film emulsion effect visible as the local red-orange halos around the bright light sources, specular highlights, and contrasting edges. Also, halation may produce a well-pronounced red glare in the midtones, mostly affecting the skin tones. Bloom emulates the combined effect of light dispersion on the boundaries of contrasting image areas, which originates in the optical system and then amplified in the emulsion layers. Notice that bloom has little in common with optical soft effects, as it appears only around the light sources. We now have our new Interstellar look. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.